and welcome to Tommy's Game Table. Today I'm actually going to be doing things a little bit differently. I'm going to be playing around with some XPS foam and this little bit of a 3D printed Hobbit house. I'm not actually going to talk about what we're going to be needing for today's build, because today I'm actually just going to be winging it. I'm just going to go with the flow and see what I need, and we'll talk about it as we go on with the video. Awesome. All right, well, let's get into it, guys. So I'm pretty much just trying to build up some foundational sort of XPS, because I'm going to turn this into like a bit of a classic Hobbit home with that nice sort of mounded shape. We might even put like a road or something through the middle here, and maybe like a bit of a raised tree or something over here. And yeah, should be pretty cool for some encounters or just as a cool diorama. We'll see what we can do. So we've drawn in a little bit of a road here and a bit of a path, just a rough foundation. I'm also going to stick these bits of foam on just to raise that side up a little bit. And we'll glue it all down with a hot glue gun, and we'll see how we go from there. So you can see that I've glued these pieces down now. I've also just done like a little bit of a trace of that piece that we're going to be putting in there, so we don't accidentally cut anything away that we don't want to. So we're going to use a combination of knives and our hot wire cutter. Hell yeah. So starting to cut a little bit of that shape in, just getting it started. I'm going to start with also just cutting out this whole road section, so that's a little bit flatter to the table. So we'll do that and we'll see how we're looking. So I've hit this with a old hot wire cutter. I've used knives, Stanley knives, pliers. I've literally even got like a wire brush out. But honestly, I found the best way to do this is just with your hands, scratching it out. This is easily the messiest part of the whole build, so just be prepared, have a vacuum on hand. But I found that this is probably the easiest way to do it, just ripping it out with your hands. Alright, so I just want to smooth out everything I've just done, so the best way to do that is probably with a little bit of fire. So we're just going to fire that up. Awesome, now we're going to start burning this all down. So you can see where we've got all this nice sort of road base, but it's just a bit messy and hectic. So we're just going to come through and melt it all down and make it nice and smooth. Now this is sort of what our road's looking like. It's got a nice deep recess. I cut these couple of stairs in there just for a little bit of added flavour. Got this nice built up area. So now I've just got this random sort of bunch of sculptor mold and like different Mod Podgy thingies that I'm going to play around with. And we're just going to see if we've got enough to cover this whole board. Wish me luck. So that's the first time I've used modeling compound, and I think it's actually worked pretty good. It's already starting to set. It's starting to set while I was sort of applying it on the whole thing. Also had a couple of these sort of plaster of Paris molds that I'd made. So I just threw a couple of rocks in the edge there just to make a bit of a cliff face. And just got to give that one like 24 hours to dry, and then we'll get back into it. Alright, so now I've waited for all that to dry, and then I've just hit it with our Mod Podge and sand and black paint mix. And while that's drying, I've just tipped a whole heap of sand through this road and up the path, and just a little bit more scattered here, there and everywhere, just to add a little bit more texture and depth to some areas. So we're going to let that dry now, and we're going to come back and see how we're looking. Alright, so now I'm going to get some literal rocks, and we're just going to grab the old hot glue gun, and we're going to stick those down and paint them up. And that's sort of how it should be looking. I've started to paint these other rocks in different colors. I'm just waiting for this black to dry, and then I'm going to go through and paint them some different colors, dry brush the whole thing, and we're going to start flocking. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so we've just applied a simple dry brush over all of the rocks. I'm trying to give it a little bit more depth, make them look a little bit more realistic, even though they are rocks, but just brings out a little bit more of those shadows and everything like that. So I've also just done a light dry brush over all of the brown just to make it look a little bit more realistic again. Even though nearly all of this is going to get covered in flocking, it's just in case any of it comes up, it'll look like dirt underneath. Sweet. So we're just going to let that dry. Speaking of flocking, we're going to move on to covering the whole thing with a little bit of this fine turf and also a tiny bit of parsley just to create some variation. Look like little leaves, and I think I've also got some coriander leaves in there. If you've got oregano or something, that works fine. Just to create a little bit of sort of dry dead foliage and stuff like that around it. But by the end of this whole build, this is just going to be absolutely covered in foliage and gardens and all kinds of great stuff. Okay, first step, cover all your surface with PVA glue that you want to have covered in flock. And then you get your flock and you start tipping it all over. Boom. And there you have it. And I might even actually get a little bit of spots of that stuff and put it all through the road. Like that's just sitting on there at the moment, but I really love that effect. So I'm gonna put a little bit of PVA on the road just to get that nice natural sort of blending of grass growing into it. So you can see now that you've got all those different layers. I've got a little bit of the army painter flocking as well as the fine turf. And also just that little bit of oregano and dried coriander. Just looks great. A little bit of like dry foliage falling from the trees because I'm going to have a few trees in this diorama as well. So yeah, it's starting to come together. I'm going to have to start painting that little hobbit house soon. That's really looking great. Beautiful. Alright, so I've just done like a really quick and easy paint job on this one. It's just still drying. I've done just a bit of a wood effect on all of the timber, some stone on the chimney and the path, and just a little bit of detailing around the edges. Now I'll let that one dry, but then we'll move on to doing a little bit more decorating. So I've bought all of these cheap trees just on Amazon. That was super cheap. You get what you pay for, so I'm probably going to flock them up and make them look a little bit nicer. I'm just starting to pop a few of them around here just to really start thickening up the foliage. We're using this beautiful flogging just to try and add a little bit more pizzazz. Alright, so I've just primed and undercoated these bad boys, just some little mushrooms and some little accessories, just the last little bits and pieces to go on there before it's pretty much finished. Alright, let's get those ones painted up. Alright, I've given these little mushrooms a cool little paint job. So now, I've got a couple of little snails and some other little bits and pieces. So this is the final piece. I just need to stick all these onto the actual diorama. And then we're pretty much ready to rock and roll. That's done. Alright, there you have it. That's sort of like my first diorama, just sort of free flowing, just sort of going with how it all flows together, and turned out pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with this one. So yeah, if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, like and subscribe, share with your friends, all that kind of good stuff, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.